Good evening. I'm Kimberly Edwards with cookingwithkimberly.com, and tonight I'm going to make one of my very favorite things that I've always loved as a child even, creamy mushroom soup. This is my own recipe. I've basically done most of the prep work to make this video very short for you, but I have it all in the blog post for you. I have about 2 pounds of onions, miscellaneous mushrooms. I have shiitakes and buttons, and I like to store the stems. Usually when you cook with shiitakes, you don't actually cook with the stems, mostly. So what I do is I remove the stems and put them all in a Ziploc bag, throw them in the freezer for such a time as this. I take them back out and I slice them very finely, leave the bud and the root tip. Don't put that in. But they're very flavorful, and they're just going to get zipped up in this soup anyway. So I'm going to bring you over to my stove. Here are my mushrooms. I also have probably about 2 cups of mushrooms that were dried. They're dried mushrooms. We get them from our Polish-Ukrainian store, and I just reconstituted them actually with some hot tea instead of hot water. It's just a little more flavor. Okay, so what am I doing? I have 2 large onions already chopped up. I'm going to put half of the onions in a frying pan that's preheated to medium heat, and half of the onions in the large soup pot, the stock pot, to soften up. Just to split them up and make this go a lot faster. You're going to leave that on medium heat. Now, in the pot, I had a tablespoon of olive oil and the frying pan. Each a tablespoon of olive oil and a tablespoon of coconut oil today I used. You can use butter as well. I'm just going to put some pepper on these bad boys because onions don't come with pepper flavor on them. Freshly cracked black pepper is so much fresher and more flavorful than the typical ground stuff you get at the store that looks kind of gray in color. Work quickly. I'm also going to put a little bit of chili flake just because I like heat in both. And I'm also going to put a dash of cayenne in each.
Did you bring potatoes in, Lisa?
So you just keep stirring them around. Okay, they're getting nice and soft. This is a relatively quick dish that you can make. It's about 15 to 20 minutes prep work, chopping and stuff like that. And then it takes about 20 minutes to actually cook, which is pretty fast. Okay. They seem to be softening up a lot faster in my pot, which is fine. The chopping doesn't have to be meticulous. It can be small, it can be kind of medium in size. As long as you cook it through, everything's going to get zipped up with a hand blender anyway. But if the smaller you chop it, the quicker it's going to cook in your pan. Okay. Once these look somewhat softened, you're going to put half of the mushrooms, the fresh raw mushrooms, into the pot. I'm going to wait 2 more seconds for the frying pan. And you just want to mix them up, get them coated, let them get soft, cook up a bit. Okay, these look nice. We'll throw these in. I'm going to hold off on the salt slightly, because what happens if you put salt in your mushrooms right now, they're going to start leaching a lot of liquid, and it's just going to be a wet mixture instead of sauteing up properly. So I usually wait a little longer till I start adding salt to my mushrooms. My mom had a hard time feeding me as a child. I didn't want to eat breakfast. I hated it, and she would pretty much resort to feeding me anything that I would remotely agree to eating. And usually what I chose was cream of mushroom soup, but back then it was cream of mushroom soup in a Campbell's can, and I still love it to this day. I just doctor it up, of course. But this is the grown-up version that's much more delicious, much more complex. Once these are all softened up, you're going to throw everything that's in the pan into the pot. Again, it was just to split it up so that you could cook things a lot faster. Mushrooms are very good for your immune system. So usually when people are sick in the household, I like to make up a huge batch of this. Again, the frying pan is taking a little longer. Be patient. It'll all happen. Okay, at this time, in my big pot, I'm going to add all the garlic, in fact. I have minced up 3 cloves of garlic. I'm just going to add that to the pot, mix that in with the mushrooms and the onions. I also so happen to have, I always tell you to experiment in the kitchen. Don't worry about the recipe exactly and exact amounts and stuff like that. Today I have half of a red pepper that I want to use up in the fridge, and it's going in the pot today. There it goes. You will not see that on the recipe in the blog post. I wish you guys could smell it. Once you have everything prepared, this goes lightning fast. I'm going to show you what it looks like in the pot. There's my pot. Hope you can see. The mushrooms and the onions are softened up, and the liquids are starting to come out of them. This frying pan is a little bit behind, and that's okay. It'll be just a couple seconds. I love using all kinds of mushrooms: cremini mushrooms, enoki mushrooms, the oyster mushrooms, the king oyster mushrooms, tons of dried mushrooms that you're able to get, chanterelles and oysters and lobster again, trumpet mushrooms, they're really good too. And if you go to the Asian stores, you can find a lot of different Asian mushrooms that we don't typically carry fresh in the stores that are fun to play with. Okay, this mixture is going into my pot. So now I have all the onions, all the mushrooms, the garlic, turn off the oven, in this pot. I'm just going to let it go a couple more seconds. I'm actually probably going to add some salt now. The water has already started to leach out, so it's not much of an issue at this point. Now don't forget, you're going to add chicken broth. Depending upon the chicken broth that you use, or you buy, or you made, depends on how much salt content. So just be aware of that. Store-bought stocks have quite a bit of sodium in it, unless you get the reduced sodium, which I usually tend to get. As you all know, I like to cut down on sodium a lot. Okay, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the rehydrated mushrooms. They're wet now, totally soaking wet, in the tea. I'm also going to add the tea to this. No need to chop them because they're just going to get zipped up in the blender. Okay. Now I'm going to add 1 1/4 cups of red wine. Whatever kind of red wine you want to use, you may use. Doesn't have to be dry, doesn't have to be sweet. It can be either one. I often use port wine or sherry, but today I'm using just a straight up red wine from a vineyard called Terra Vineyards in Niagara Lake, Ontario. So there's my wine. I'm going to let that just reduce slightly. All right. Next one I'm going to add. See how fast this is moving along? I don't have many ingredients left, do I? Hold on 1 second. Okay. So this is coming to heat, to boil. And when that happens, I'm going to add the chicken stock. Now I have 5 cups of chicken stock. This happens to be store-bought today. I don't have any left in my freezer. It's reduced sodium, and this is all going into the pot as well. Now what you're going to do, I'm turning the heat up a bit to a medium-high. I want it to come up to a simmer. Once it comes up to a simmer, I'm going to bring you over here and talk for a little while. Once it comes up to a simmer, you're going to take a hand blender that looks like this, something like this. Zoom, zoom, zoom. You press a little button, it goes zoop, zoop. And you're going to zip the whole mess up. Once you do that, then you're going to add the cream or the kefir or the buttermilk or whatever it is you seem to have. In the recipe on the side, I do say kefir. Kefir is a lower calorie, lower fat dairy. It kind of tastes like buttermilk. Buttermilk also is low in fat. Don't forget, I know it sounds very fatty and high in calories, but actually buttermilk is like 1%. It's like 1% milk. It just has a tangy flavor, more like sour cream, and in a thicker texture. And the texture makes you think that it's really velvety and rich and luscious, but it's actually lower in calories. So drink your buttermilk, people. It's good for you. If there's not enough liquid in there or you want to make more soup, simple, just add more ingredients, add more chicken broth, add some tea if you have tea, add water, it's fine. Just make sure that you are seasoning what's going on. Add a little more wine, a little bit maybe, some more cracked pepper, some more cayenne pepper. What I also like to do, and to make it healthier as well, is a little bit creamier. I don't have it today, and I don't have it in the recipe, but I usually sneak it into the recipe to increase protein, and that's tofu. It's not only is it creamy, but it gives the idea that it's really rich and luscious. I blend it in. I just chunk it up into big cubes, throw it in there, and zip it up with the blender with the mushrooms and the onions and everything like that. It's very creamy. I've served it to my family, and they didn't even realize that there was tofu in it, which is great. My mom felt like it was a very rich dish. She thought I had put cream into it, and really it was only tofu, which is awesome. That's one way to get around making something more healthy, especially for kids or people that are stuck in a habit of their diet. So I'm looking at this. It's starting to come up to heat. Turning it back up. I'm just going to stir it a little bit. Okay. I like mine spicy. The rest of the family isn't much of spicy freaks. So you can allow people to put their own in at the end, or you can just put a little bit in and fix yours up at the end. I'm also going to add some fresh parsley. I'll be right back. Here's flat leaf parsley. I'm just going to wash it for you guys. I'm going to show you how to mince up some herbs. So here, make sure you have your nice sharp knife that I've shown you guys how to sharpen. You're just going to take your clump of herbs, you're going to rough chop them quickly. Okay, you're going to reorganize and put them all together. Remember what I told you, hold the tip of the knife and rock with a chef's knife, back and forth. Back and forth. Keep putting everything back together, rocking that knife all the way through to as small of a mince as you want. I don't want huge chunks of parsley in mine. When I zip up the mixture, I typically don't blend it till everything is completely smooth. I actually enjoy chunks of the mushrooms in there. So I take it to a level where there's still some chunks left in the pot. And there is your herbs. I have quite a bit here. I have probably maybe 3 tablespoons maybe. And that's okay. I might not use it all, but I'm ready nonetheless. Okay, I'm coming back over here with you. So my soup is starting to simmer here. It'll just be a couple more seconds. Again, I didn't have kefir today. I didn't have buttermilk either, but I did have some half and half cream and some milk. So I just put about half of the 3/4 of a cup of milk and half of the 3/4 of a cup of the half and half cream, just to thin it out a bit and make it a little less lower in calories. That's gonna go in after you zip up everything with this hand blender. I have a handy dandy plug on my stove, which most people do. It smells awesome, and we're all very hungry. We have some family over tonight, so we're ready to eat. More pepper in here for me. And I'm going to blend this up. Now you may remove it from the heat if you like to do this, if you're feeling a little nervous. If it's too hot, it might scare you a little bit that you're zipping it up and it's splashing or whatever. But what I suggest doing is putting it on the low. You have usually a higher low, or you have a dial of different speeds. Start on the low until things are under control, and then I would turn it up to the high heat. So bear with the noise, guys. I'll be done soon. Make sure you get any large chunks of mushrooms. Blend it up. And this is the point I would usually put the tofu in, and then I would blend it all up. Okay, high heat, high speed. Move it around through the pot. I wish I could show you, but I'm not that talented to balance the computer upside down and blend at the same time. Now, whatever consistency you like, that's your prerogative. Do what you want. There are times I will actually reserve some of the mushrooms from the frying pan, the onions, and throw them in at the very end, so that it maintains their size and texture. That's good for me. My soup is boiling at this point. You don't want to add the cream beforehand, because if you do, you could curdle it, and you're going to have chunks of cream. It's not cool at all. So I'm going to show you what this looks like right now. Okay, it's simmering, right? there we go. So